This game is probably going to be one of the most highly anticipated real-time strategy games in the last decade, and or if not, possibly the best RTS of 2025. Hello again there, friends and fans. Raptor here, and there's a lot of hype. And excitement around Broken Arrow, this game being one that has been delayed and is coming soon, but now is in a second free open beta for everyone for an unknown amount of time at this moment. But it is a great game that you may have seen before on the channel, and if not, essentially it's like World in Conflict, Warno, War Game, Steel Division, and or maybe a little World in Conflict mods and all this other stuff mixed together. It's outstanding, and I really highly recommend it. Now, for those of you just getting started in the game today, we're going to take a look at arsenals for the United States and Russia, primarily the United States today, and in another episode, Russia. So make sure you go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell, as I wanted to give you a little quick briefing as to what's new in this beta as well. There's a multiplayer mode that allows you to do co-op missions up to 3 players. You at least need 2 to be able to play the new oil refinery mission as the Russians versus the United States, and there are new factions to focus on now. Previously, we had access to a couple of different ones, including like the Airborne forces for the Russians and more tanks for the Americans, and now things are kind of mixed around a little bit. There's almost like entirely new sub-factions or specializations because they've changed around how HIMARS and other things work, and the game has been essentially rebalanced with how multiplayer works, where everyone's not rushing towards the end. It's now a combination of territory control and also destruction. So let's go ahead and jump in. So when you download the game right from the get-go, you have yourself the US default deck, and within this deck you can also modify that, or at least copy it and then modify it, and you can take a look at all the things that it has, in addition to, if you're wondering, all the units that are available in the game, at least in the moment of the beta. You can jump into the hangar and you can divide things by the American, like let's say Marines that you wanted to look at, and so you can see all the weapons that the Marine faction has for at their disposal in this game, and they can also be mixed with another faction, so you can mix it up, let's say specialty or specialization, so you can go with Airborne and Marines together and see what they have access to. And so this is a very powerful helicopter based and also infantry based deck that also has access to a bunch of armor and a lot of aircraft too. And that's where a lot of the complexity comes in. So welcome aboard. Again, make sure you subscribe, because we're going to cover all these things now in building a deck that I think might really benefit you or have a lot of fun with. Now, honestly, this game now has a mode where you can then start playing with different decks to then get different medals at the end of the battle. And so you might want to make a deck that's considered to be weak or not optimized or just for fun, to put yourself at a disadvantage. And that honestly is an amazing thing, because then it challenges you if you're a better player, and it also makes you stronger if you're a weaker player in knowing what to do and what not to do. Now, here's a deck that I've refined over a few battles, although I have not yet done one of the most important things in the game, which is customization options. In the game, for each of the different factions, you have up to 10,000 points, and there, if someone could explain this again down below in the comments section, there is something to do with being able to go over 10% of the total, although this might also change by the time the game fully releases. So if you're watching this in the future, or any of the previous reviews after the release of the game, please go watch more modern videos on this on anybody's channel, because these values, these builds, all these units could essentially change, and some of these might not even be available anymore. So definitely make sure you're watching the more up-to-date videos on this one, because some of the things, like for example armor packages, could change in their pricing too, and these are pretty important because you could add extra armor to a unit to then make it more armored. So right now, as you can see, we have 1,440 points out of 1,500. If we add that Tusk armor package, boom, we're up to 1,500, and if we go over that, then we can like apparently like still deploy. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but something along those lines. But anyway, one of the most important things in Broken Arrow is to essentially take a look at every single unit that you have in the game and break that down that way by looking at their armor, weapons package, and sometimes they even have engine and optic upgrades. So make sure you also pay attention to that. There's also optimizations for fuel, and you can carry more fuel tanks. You can also have inner pylons, wing pylons, fuselage, and that goes for helicopters too. So just keep that all in mind. Okay, we're going to go ahead and build a deck from scratch, and this is going to be kind of a rushed way on how to build, because really I want everybody to experiment and get things wrong, because really there's no such thing as right in this game, unless you're just purely going for low deaths, high loss kills on the enemy. You want to lower your losses. That's important for winning games, but maybe you're going for the medals, achievements, or trying to challenge yourself, so that's an important thing too. So let's go ahead and call this one Test 1. And one of the cool things here is that they immediately tell you the battle group size. So if you definitely absolutely want more aircraft, you can realize then, okay, I should probably go with maybe the Marines here, and then I should also go with the Airborne Infantry here because they have a lot of aircraft. Or maybe you want more tanks, so that's obviously the Armored Brigade, and the Marines get some tanks, definitely more than the Airborne Infantry do. Well, today we're going to try to do a little mix of armor and airborne, so we're going to go ahead and go with the Marines a little bit and also the airborne a little bit, just to mix that up. This is just a recommended deck for me that I've had a ton of fun with, and I think that's really good. And I just canceled it. But just keep in mind that you can do this for any of the factions where you can compare these stats. Same for the Russians. So let's go ahead and jump in to test 1. So let's go ahead and create that one. Perfect. Okay, now you can change the name at any time, so that doesn't really matter. And you can also change your deck and come back to it at any time, too. You can also edit and customize these decks during the waiting in the lobbies, so if there's something that's not quite right, you don't have to leave. You can quickly make a change and save it before you go. So if you notice, one of your friends is telling you, hey, man, that new, I don't know, F-18 upgrade pack is looking pretty cool, then you can switch to that, whatever it may be. All right, so some real basics here. We have Recon, Infantry, vehicles, support, helicopters, and air. Recon essentially is your eyes and ears and lets you see where the enemy is. Infantry does a great job of being stealthy, but are incredibly vulnerable to a lot of enemy fire, although they can also take cover in buildings, which then makes them essentially very fortified and a formidable force. They can also, of course, shoot down enemy aircraft and enemy tanks, so they're really not to be underestimated unless they're vulnerable in their transports or in helicopters. That's when they're most likely to die and be killed. Vehicles include everything from tanks to jeeps to, you know, like anything with an ATGM or a TOW or anti-aircraft missile, you know, Stingers, Iglas, that type of thing, and lots of variety there. Support would be anything to bring in supplies and or your anti-aircraft and artillery. Helicopters, you know, self-explanatory there. Helicopters are able to fire at each other, and aircraft, other aircraft, and also ground units primarily. And then aircraft, of course, the same. They're able to fire air to air and also at the ground. And some of the Recon also is an air unit. So you have drones, but they're found under the Recon tab. Let's go ahead and take a look at it then. So for this particular deck, this is your Airborne Marines deck, you know, a mix of both. Together, you do have yourself Army Snipers, Force Recon, and Scout Snipers. The Scout Snipers, I see everybody use these guys, and they're really powerful and very fun to toy around with because you can basically put these guys anywhere and have them hold fire, and they're incredibly difficult to detect and is really good at especially monitoring roads or large open fields. If you get these guys in a tree line where there's a long road coming from the enemy spawn in a huge open area, the perfect thing about that is the enemy's likely to maybe pull over in that open area and drop their artillery down, and then you can drop artillery on their artillery or a bomb or something like that, and it's really good. And these guys are pretty good at also engaging the enemy, as snipers now are able to engage more effectively enemy troops in cover. Obviously, they're going to have to peek their head out at some time to see who's shooting at them and try to shoot back, and that's when they're going to have a bad time. Now, keep in mind also that you can transport some of these troops in different equipment or also on foot at no additional cost. So you can get Army Snipers out literally just on foot, which is cool because then you can use other transports to pick them up. So if you had a bunch of Airborne Infantry dropped off by a Chinook and then you deploy these guys, you can have that very Chinook come back for these guys and then drop them off elsewhere. So these guys, just like the Scout Snipers, are very effective too, but bigger team, more weaponry, more dangerous, and also can be modified with their loadouts, including anti-material rifles, which is perfect for destroying enemy artillery, light transports, fuel, that kind of thing, you know, FOBs, that type of stuff. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and throw these guys here, the Scout Snipers, which I've experienced a few times in the game, just out in a regular old Humvee. We're going to keep it cheap, and also we're going to give them a anti-material rifle too with their team, which is great. So we're going to go ahead and throw one of those in the deck by just double-clicking, and we'll do 2 of those with 2 transports, so we're already up to 250 points. Okay, the next thing I definitely want to recommend that I've had a great time with is these really awesome-looking IFAVs. The Russians have something like this too. They've got kind of more professional versions of it. Their Typhoons and some of their like buggies look like this. So you definitely want a buggy with like an HMG. They can do a lot of damage, and they're also capable of being transported via parachute, the same with the snipers. So that's pretty cool. So they can all come on in your initial wave, but we'll talk about that a little later. I would definitely recommend 2 of those, and would definitely recommend the MG, honestly, because it can shoot down choppers pretty quick too. But, you know, you do you, experiment and see what the metas are at the time. Drones. We got ourselves some new drones in the game. They're kind of like refined and edited a little bit, changed up a bit, and I think we're seeing the Global Hawk for the first time too, which is outstanding. These things are just like AWACS just up in the sky. Very vulnerable. Everybody tries to shoot them down, but they can stay back very far and almost operate like seed aircraft in terms of staying on your side of the line, but providing huge amounts of recon. These are probably a must-have for both sides. You can pop these in the rear and scout for enemy troops that may have snuck behind your lines. You know, they have infrared, so they're quite capable of finding an enemy chopper that snuck behind your lines, a tank, a transport, whatever. So very good for cleanup and also for monitoring the front lines. So gotta say that's a must-have too, and or any equivalent that you might find for mixing up with the armor. You're also supposed to have 2 specializations at a time, so you will go armor and Marines, or Marines and Airborne, or Airborne and armor, that kind of thing. Any sort of mixes like that, definitely cool. Now, we still got lots of points to spend. Unfortunately, the Global Hawk doesn't really have an upgrade, so you can go with 2 of those if you'd like, but I also would recommend the Force Recon too with the LAVs. Again, Marines in a pretty damn good tough vehicle, and the LAVs themselves are also good recon, so we're going to get some of these if we can. Unfortunately, we can't because we haven't chosen the army tanks, the armored army tanks, so that's pretty cool that they have that. We don't at the moment, but these still can be used for protecting those forces. So keep in mind that the transports are not always just a ride. They actually have some ability to fight. They also have some optics and some smoke, so you can really spend heavy on your recon, and if you play it right, if you're a micro player, that is good for you. Oh, look at that. Black Ops or Green Ops. Shotguns or sniper rifles. Interesting. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and put 2 of those in there. We still have a few points to spend, and I think what we will do too is maybe grab ourselves a let's see, we have a Humvee here that's also capable of taking down the enemy. It's armed with an M240. We've also got ourselves a armor package, and we can change that package too to an M2 heavy machine gun, and that's another one I would recommend. That's definitely something you want to kind of go along with those IFAVs. And the grenade launcher here could be good, but I, again, have had a lot of luck with the just the M2. It's really a good piece of equipment. I mean, it just never fails. So let's go ahead and go with those 2. And these, again, are great for ambushing infantry, ambushing transports. Keep in mind, bring it light to the fight, and zip, rip, and dip. That's basically what you're doing. We also have ourselves a Gray Eagle here. It's also has the capability of engaging enemy units, and this is really good for maybe possibly sneaking behind enemy lines and getting a Hail Mary play on enemy artillery. The Griffin missiles are really good at that, and you might want to bring a couple of those. You can bring up to 8 there, and that's cool. I mean, if you stumble upon a completely undefended enemy convoy with your Global Hawk, you can risk 125-point Gray Eagle rather than your main Air Force. So you could have air units without even being in the air tab, and that's another cool thing that I've been able to do. I would also recommend going in without it as well, and you can use these to lure the enemy in. You can basically set up an AA net with Patriot missiles, or have like a Eagle 2 on standby, which are really good at long-range air-to-air combat, and the enemy will try to deploy a few things being like, we can't let them see. But what they don't see is that they're being lured into a trap. So a little bit of foresight there, and a little bit of like kind of lure skewer type plan. Okay, we're at force 975. Again, you can make some modifications here. I'm going to leave some room for error, but everyone should feel free to kind of mix things up as they want to. But definitely just make sure you've got a mix of light vehicles, infantry with armored transports, and then some aircraft recon as well. Now, the infantry aren't much different than the recon in terms of the same concept of bringing in things that are quick and you know, able to transport them to the front lines without being spotted. You're probably going to be spotted in these IFVs no matter what, but what they are capable of is dropping off Allied troops very quickly and then taking cover and supporting them from the rear. So ideally what you would like to do with these SMA here, which are anti-tank Marines, I believe, these guys here can get into a building and then fire at the enemy transports that are approaching, and then this ACVP, which by the way you can upgrade to have itself, Bushmaster. Yeah, that's really good against enemy infantry transports. I mean, you can clap their transports as they're coming in with your SMA, and then you can additionally dish out the pain with this transport here, which is armed with that Bushmaster 2, which is 30. Is that a 30 millimeter? Yeah, that's bad times. And yeah, it fires heat and AP, so it can take out infantry and tanks alike. Again, very spendy, but I would definitely recommend 2 of these even on the cheap. Those transports are good too, but typically I try to go in at least with the some sort of AT unit every time. And even if it's not the SMAW or the Dragon, I absolutely recommend a TOW as well. The Dragon is kind of like a TOW. It's kind of a AT weapon. Well, it is an AT weapon, but it is kind of a shorter range, 100 to 1,000 meters, as where you have your TOWs with 400 meters and do a lot more damage. So the Dragon is good for transport at range, but the TOWs are really for tanks and heavier vehicles. So they all do their damage. They all have their purposes, and sometimes the enemy can't identify what missile's firing at them, so it doesn't really matter sometimes what you're shooting at them. If another player sees themselves being shot at, they might disengage and go elsewhere. So it's not always about min-maxing a spreadsheet. Sometimes it's just about getting in their head and not really something that you can put down on a sheet. What I mentioned earlier about luring and skewering with the aircraft. So keep that in mind too with calling out drones and stuff like that. Love this. Love that we now get HMG teams too, and we can put these in a building or like a house by a bridge or something like that. Choke points, open areas, these are all really good for the H2MG team to lock down. And again, this is a really powerful weapon, and there's two of them too. So consider what I was just saying about putting these on a Humvee. Imagine these things in a building. This is going to lock down a lot of transports from going through there. Anything light like BTRs are probably going to have a tough time getting through these, and they may panic, and this could help you to pin them down with HMGs, and then you finish them off with choppers or mortars or artillery or something like that. So a good option. And of course you have your option of a Humvee here or an ISV. Now, personally, I'm going to go through, and we'll go through all of these units too. We'll jump back to the recon real quick and just talk about anything that we may have missed, which we really haven't. I mean, these are just different types of transports, and a lot of these are kind of like self-explanatory variants of those transports. Like this is just a lighter Humvee, essentially. It's not, but I mean, it is, right? Like it holds that many men. It's got a gun on it. It could transport troops to the front line. It's just lighter armored and thus more susceptible to destruction. But also it's more expensive because it's faster and can carry kind of some of the same stuff. So sometimes glass cannons are going to be more expensive because getting ahead of the enemy and being able to outrun them and kite them into ambushes is more powerful than deflecting them with armor. So keep that in mind. But back to infantry. In the infantry tab, we have Airborne. I guess we'll start from the top then. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I get so excited to share the ones that I like the most. I've been actually loving these a lot. Airborne are a lot of fun. They're almost more versatile Marines in terms of their mobility. Obviously, they can go in Chinooks, which for whatever reason just seem to transport faster than the Osprey. Maybe that's not true. I haven't been able to directly compare Osprey and Chinooks at the moment. I think their top speeds are obviously different, and that's probably well proven. But what I mean is that the Osprey is usually a massive target, as where the Chinooks have been able to get pretty nimble into spots where I didn't think they would, with a lot of damage control. They have a lot of armor, and these guys are certainly capable of being transported via those too, which is pretty cool. And so Airborne, interestingly enough, don't have access to a Chinook here at the moment, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So Airborne can come in via these vehicles here, and or on foot, which you can transport them via a helicopter or other trucks, that kind of thing. So definitely recommend the Airborne because they're also able to be transported via paradrop. Remember what we mentioned about the recon. So if you're having an Airborne deck, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I want my Airborne coming in probably a aircraft or like a helicopter, but probably not like an ISV. And that is certainly where they excel, is getting behind enemy lines and locking buildings down and keeping the way open for like the Marines to fight their way to them. Almost think of the plan for Market Garden. Get ahead of all the troops that will be invading that area or pushing forward, clear the landing zones with an initial force, and then try to continue to clear the way for all the forces. So they're basically holding the door, and other forces need to reach them. Or they can, of course, do sabotage. There's many ways to use those guys, not just one. Those are just a couple of ideas. Anybody with a gun and a little experience and some explosives can make some big damage, some big hurt on the enemy. First-hand experience in that one. And by that, I mean RTS player. I've done it, and it's fun. And it sucks to have it done to you, but that's the name of the game. So we have ourselves two SMAW, our Airborne. An interesting mix of Marines here, really, and Airborne. So that's definitely recommended. I would also recommend trying out an HMG, although I have not, I don't have it in my current deck. I have seen it in action, and that's one that I definitely want to put in there. So this is going to be kind of a already existing deck modified for me. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with having two similar decks that have maybe a few different pieces of equipment in it, so that way you can try it out, but yet still feel familiar. And that's what takes this game a very long time to play. is ever so slightly making changes to things. I'm going to go ahead and call in 2-tow. And we have our 2B, a little bit more effective there at engaging the enemy. And again, you can read what the differences are between these things if you kind of click back and forth. You can see things changing over here on the right side. You can see what the range is of certain things, or how much ammo they get, and or like what the capacity is, that kind of thing. Like ammo capacity, maybe their distance, maybe their damage. All those things are found there. Very important stats there, so keep that in mind. Additionally, and I should have mentioned this earlier, you can see a lot more information about all of these forces here on this upper right side. You have yourself their ability to like visual range, number of troops, health, armor, maybe their ability to be stealthy, how fast they can move, what their weight may be, that kind of thing. So just keep that in mind. And also special abilities for those troops, such as sprinting for infantry. They're able to do that too. Okay, we got close quarter combat Marines. That's really good for clearing out buildings. These guys are incredible at that. And they're pretty good at holding buildings, but I've oftentimes seen them either in a defensive position where the enemy is like in a town and they're waiting for the enemy to occupy some buildings, and then they sneak in behind them and clear them out with their shotguns and grenade launchers and things like that. Or they're just really good at kind of almost acting like a recon, where they will kind of act as an early warning system, because they do have a few good ways to kill what usually arrives first, which is either enemy helicopters, which that doesn't often go well for them, but transports. Transports are the things that I'm constantly seeing, and a lot of players taking those out with light AT, or at least damaging them and deterring them. Damaging and deterring sometimes can be more important than actually destroying, but you want those points for destruction too. So those guys are pretty good. Let's see, we've gone through those and the dragons. Let's go on to then our AGL. Essentially, think of this automatic grenade launcher, 40 millimeter. This is basically your H2 in terms of same idea with the heavy machine gun, except these are grenades. So huge amount of suppression here, huge amount of damage to infantry that's been dismounted, and to vehicles too, just lacking a little bit on what seems to be the range and maybe ammunition. Here you got, let's see, 360 rounds per gun there. Here you have 360. Wait, that's for the AGLs here. 102, that's what we want. Yeah, so 102 for that one. HMG is 1,000. So a lot more suppression from the machine gun maybe than the grenade launchers over time. This is probably more immediate up front, but once you run out of ammo, that's GG on that one. So definitely a cool thing to use. Good old Marines. We saw them before in the previous beta. They're back. Not really anything too different with them. They're very effective, good numbers, very hard to clear out of buildings. These are your roadblocks. These will basically block people from going through an entire town without taking a lot of damage. 6 heat, 84 millimeter. That's cool, man. Really good at shredding transports again, and doing a lot of good damage to tanks and like force and things like that. The Marines with their high numbers can really take a lot of losses before they're out of the game. And remember, when you're taking losses, these troops can be replenished, and they have abilities to pop smoke. So it's very much in your corner to go in with a bunch of Marines or infantry and kill some transports, and know that you'll take some losses but do damage before pulling out with smoke, and then go replenishing at a supply point. All good ideas for sure. All right, Stinger team. Let's move on to that. Oh, and keep in mind they're transports too. Grenade launchers, amphibious, and yeah, this is kind of like the same deal with what we saw before with the Bushmaster and the Recon. So pretty much the same concepts here for a lot of these vehicles. Humvees, AAVPs, and ISVs are what we're going to be seeing a lot of here in this particular specialization. Now, Stinger teams are great. Stinger teams, just like the Iglas, are fairly evenly matched. I think they've got the same amount of munitions at 3. Oh, they have actually 6 for this one, for the Stinger. So that's a good amount of ammo. And maybe I was thinking of something else, but maybe I was thinking of the number of launchers. The Stinger here, though, again, a great way to protect your troops in towns. When most people deploy in a town, they will bring what is usually an ATGM and some sort of AA, and then all their infantry. Everybody's learned from all the previous games and has a lot of experience from Warno and Wargame Red Dragon and those types of things. So a lot of people will use this as just a kind of close range deterrent for helicopters, or luckily, if you get in there close enough, a way to destroy like enemy planes that are flying over. You can get one lucky shot off and finish off something that could be worth a lot of points. So keep that in mind. Another tow, kind of similar to our Saber here. And there's differences between those. Again, read all the differences here by clicking through the menus. These are all subject to change. But again, points differ. More points usually means better unit, but it all depends on how you use the unit. And speaking of units, we have another new unit here, the Weapon Squad, which I don't remember seeing at all, with javelins. And these guys really feel like a couple of airborne sprinkled in with a couple of dragons, but longer range, and that's why they're the javelins there. And I think a couple of these guys also may have, oh yeah, M240s, so that's also pretty good. 2 of those. So great amount of suppression, great amount of damage on enemy tanks with those, and a great roadblock. These guys are actually really good with recon, because you can put these squads together in low numbers and almost use them as a kind of a force recon, but not like the Marines. What I mean by that is putting them behind enemy lines with these guys and really wreak a lot of havoc with a small amount of troops. The recon could do the reconning, and the weapons squad can do all the damage. And I feel like this was a typical type of setup for Wargame or some of the previous Eugen games, where you would see a very highly skilled, very high number, and very well-equipped group that was also recon, and these guys would be worth like hundreds of points. Luckily, these guys are only 130, which ain't too cheap, but, I mean, considering the fact that a Marine squad is 90, these guys for 130, that's actually like a small step up for a lot of javelins here. You have 6, so that's a lot of damage potential on it, like a convoy. And that is a lot of the game, is ambushing and delaying the enemy, destroying the enemy, or dissipating the enemy, meaning like dissuading them from attacking, is a major part of the game that you can't put on a spreadsheet. So definitely something that I would bring into the weapons squad. So I'm going to grab these guys as well. And I'm going to bring in 2 of these, and keep in mind, when you lose these units, you will get these units back over time, and they will replenish. And I'm also going to bring in that HMG too. Now, there's probably more points I could spend here, but you know, these are just some general recommendations for this deck. And again, remember, keep in mind that if you want to exit and go do something else, you can come back at any time and pick things up. So it's never a problem in this game. All right, on to tanks and vehicles. Now, there's not too many here because we're not specializing with the tanks today. But there are some pretty capable vehicles here for destroying enemy vehicles that are glass cannons. You got your Humvees, your LAV ATs. These can all, of course, be modified and modernized, and that's really good. Got an LAV with an AT. Oh, would you look at that? And messy too. Big O Abrams. What a nice tank. So this is a kind of a, here's your lower tier Abrams at 205. I forget all the different types of Abrams in the game, but essentially it's like you've got 5 different classes, with I think the trophy with other upgrades and armor packages being amongst some of the best for the Americans. But the FEP is a pretty good, like, high mid-tier tank where you don't get too many of them, but this tank's ability to engage enemy troops and tanks from a distance is pretty good, especially in higher numbers. The way I've been using these is usually taking these FEPs, both of them, and also mixing them in with like 2 HCs. Now I'm selecting 4 here because sometimes I will bring in 2 of these FEPs, 2 of these HCs, and kind of mix them together, and then have 2 other HCs go somewhere else and assist across the line. Typically, I'm defending somewhere while also attacking somewhere, and then I have the ability to try to reinforce wherever we might be attacking. So those Abrams are almost always an absolute godsend. Now, I've been seeing the AI play a lot with the Sheridan. Sheridan's great and all. I mean, I love this tank. It's really, really fun. In like, hell, I think I remember first using it a lot with success in air-land battle for Wargame. And it was good times. It is good times. But it's a unit that I don't often see and haven't really used myself. But you do have at least the 152 millimeter HE. Like if that thing fires an HE round, that's pretty much a DED on any sort of infantry in the open. So it's not to be discounted. It's not bad. But it's just not something that I've been able to apply to my current or the current metas that I've been seeing. AGS here, very good paratroop tank. It's like a mini Abrams in a way. Just think of it as kind of a light Abrams. And this thing is comparable to something that the Russians also get. And this is good, at least armor support for your infantry. So it can be paradrops. So you might want to get a couple of these. Typically I hold on to 2 of them to try to paradrop behind enemy lines. But you don't always have to bring that along. We also have ourselves the M60A1, which I've been seeing people use this on occasion. I don't know if they're just doing it for the memes, but Yeah, I mean, it's great that we got it. It's capable, but just like the Sheridan, this is probably good for light anti-vehicle work, and this is good for light anti-infantry work. A light tank, that's good for that stuff. But at 115 points and 175 points, that's pretty good stuff right there. So, but that's pretty much it for the vehicles. I do want to bring at least one AGS to fill out my deck here, and maybe we'll bring more in the future. But we'll just kind of keep that at 1 for now. And again, another great recommendation. Let's go ahead and jump back to our test deck there. Now we're going to go to support. Now support in this game is really cool. The way this works is we're going to touch on the supplies first. There are supply helicopters, there are supply ground vehicles, and that's all I've seen so far. But what I can confirm is that some of the helicopters are able to call supply too, and then these ground vehicles can pick up from a giant fob that you can build on the ground, like by basically dumping a ton of supply on the ground, like in the middle of the map. You can have other vehicles come to it and pick up from that pile, and then bring it to where your infantry might be closer to the front line. So you can create an area for all of your supplies to resupply and then bring things to the front line, for example, to like a missile launcher or something that might be low on ammo or might be damaged. So you can kind of continuously ferry supplies via the MTVR, the MTV, and the LVSR. LVSR is what you're going to probably try to be using if you're resupplying a lot of batteries, like multiple Paladins, maybe your MLRSs, or just creating a giant fob to resupply a lot of your infantry. I like to carry one of these guys. I think these guys are great and have like a hilarious voice actor. And that's just a sweet looking vehicle right there with a big old container on the back. So I love that. And then 2 MTVs to be able to kind of feed off of that and bring the supplies to wherever else it might be needed. Let's talk about anti-aircraft. This is probably my favorite. The LAV-AD, air defense version here, capable of engaging enemy helicopters, enemy aircraft. It's fast, it's intimidating, it really shoots down a lot of helicopters, and I love it. It's also got an option to fire hydras at the enemy if you want to as well, so that's kind of cool. So you can go with the double missile pods or the hydra rocket pod if you want to. I'm just going to keep on with the double missile. I haven't had any problems with that, and same with upgrading armor and smoke here. Maybe a good idea for this thing because it's kind of really strong but really weak, glass cannon type situation. But it could take a lot of damage. It could take a hit from a helicopter even, but usually when the enemy sees this, they go all for it. So if it's getting attacked, it might be dead. So you got to get out of there right away and disengage. But a great piece of equipment. Let's go on to another piece of AA, which you may have saw just before, the Slam Ram. Black Betty, Bam Lam. This thing here is great. I've been enjoying the hell out of this in the new beta. This thing is basically a flatbed truck, like the Russians would typically do, but with a bunch of missiles armed right on the back of it. So I think these AIM-120s are, as it says, lead pursuit missiles, and they have a big O range. Like they've got an incredible low altitude range of 3,000 and high altitude range of 3,000. And that's for helicopters and that's for aircraft. And so you can modify this to kind of have a mix of both. And I think this is really good with the, let's see if we can do the mix there. Where are the mixes I've seen? Oh yeah, here. So you can arm this thing with 6 like long range, kind of more, this is more for anti-aircraft planes, and this is kind of more for a mix of helicopters. So you could have 4 for plane. It can fire at anything really, but these are more for the helicopters. This is where you're gonna have more luck with that, and these larger missiles are for your aircraft. Now, from what I've been seeing, I think I might want to switch with the 6 AIMs. Those are just the situations I've been getting into. So I'm gonna go with this instead because this is really going to be a really great, fast-moving, big area deterrence weapon. It's almost, man, it's crazy. It's like an LAV, but with way less armor. It's like wet rice paper. That's what it is. Like a mosquito is going to fly into it and it's going to explode. So this thing is basically like a Patriot to me in terms of its like anti-aircraft capability. I don't believe this can fire at any sort of missiles, but what I mean is that just if you're trying to prevent the enemy from getting around with you in the air, this is a great way to do that, and definitely recommend at least one of those. Might even go with 2 to, you know, usually I'm working multiple sides, so to defend the left and right. Oh yeah, I forgot about this too, the LMTV. I believe this can also transport troops around and also some supply. So 2,000 on the supply, but a great troop transport, good for Marines and good for maybe picking up pilots that could get shot down. In this game, when your pilots get shot down from aircraft, you can pick them up and retreat and bring them back behind friendly lines and, you know, get them rescued and get points for doing that. So pretty cool transport there. Let's move on to artillery. We'll start light with the mortars here. Well, actually, one more supply vehicle to cover, the LAV-L. This thing is logistics, and is an LAV, a little bit more armored on the frontline side. Like this is what you would probably bring in to resupply Marines that were just under fire and keep nearby. And this is really good for supplying the front lines much more than the other ones, just because it might not be killed as easily, but the other ones are cheap. So you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. I did also forget a couple of things here, folks. I forgot the Avenger. Yeah, this is new too. Something I haven't used too much, but I really like. It's like the LAV a bit, but a little bit more, I'd say, maybe dated, but still capable. This thing has Stinger missiles and it's good against choppers. So with its ability to move really fast, this you can micro around buildings. And if the enemy's, you know, somewhere where they are firing at a building and they're nearby it, you could zip it around a corner and shoot them down with a couple of Stingers and then a little bit of that Browning. Again, modifiable with the double missile pods. I think that's probably a better bet, but a little bit more expensive too at 40 extra points. So you're starting to get into 130 territory, but still just fine. Typically, I don't mess with armor too much with these lighter units, but maybe it's good. I'll have to experiment with that a little bit more, but definitely use at your own risk. We'll bring one of those out, and now it's time to cover light transports too. This here is the... oh, man. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Nice. I don't know what the hell to call this thing. I just call it the misclick. That's what it looks like to me. And this thing here is basically a mortar-ish type deal. It's an MLRS, but it's like... it functions kind of like how the mortar variant does, too. This, I don't know, this feels like a German weapon from World War II, like the Panzerfaust, or whatever it is. The, not Panzerfaust, but what the hell is that thing called? Panzer... I don't know, whatever... Walking Zafus, or I don't know. It's the half track with the damn giant cages on the side that's got the 300mm like Nebelwerfer rounds. And if you know what I'm talking about, comment down below. But yeah, this thing basically works like that with some big O heavy hitters on it. And yeah, actually it's got some bonuses to ignore cover, 70mm heat MLRS, and also the AG grenade launcher on there, the automatic grenade launcher. So pretty cool. I usually just kind of picture this thing as a Marine transport and don't really give it too much of a attention, but we also have Catfire on there as well, which I need to see these damn things in action. I have not seen anybody use these. I have seen them work. Oh, man. I've seen them work and I've seen them deployed, but I've not seen anybody use them. So I'm wondering either if A, nobody really knows what they are, or B, they know what they are and just don't have an opportunity to use them. So, yeah, these things are kind of interesting. I definitely would recommend you pulling one out to basically deploy it and fire at the enemy with it. It's kind of more of an artillery unit, so just keep that in mind, as we do have an LAV mortar variant that's kind of like this as well. So this one's firing 81mm mortars out the top, and just like the previous one, there you go, the hatch opens up, and a crew actually pops out for this one, so you can upgrade that with the Dragon Fire as well, so you can fire a... 120mm shell rather than the 81mm, and I don't know if there's a crew visible on this one. Oh, there is. Okay, so then they can fire that as well. So there's differences to our mortars and kind of these mobile weapons systems that are not necessarily artillery. Well, they are, but they're not howitzers, is what I mean. So there you go. Now, love this, the Hawkeye. This is great. This thing is so damn fast, I can't even believe it. It's an artillery gun mounted on a Humvee. That's it, right? That's it. That's the tweet. This thing is great. I have had so much fun pulling up quick, firing artillery and getting out and getting the enemy's attention with this thing. It's great. They'll try to fire at you. They think it's something big. A lot of players are not really used to close range fire like this. That's a little further than usual at 3,200 meters. But with that 105mm shell, it can cause a lot of mess, especially on enemy attacks. Again, to disperse the enemy, to disorient the enemy, that's a great weapon to do that. Brutus, same concept here, except we have ourselves high explosive and cluster rounds too. Wow, imagine that. Yeah, the Brutus can fire clusters. Same concept, except instead of a Humvee, it's mounted on that same... Is that the same truck, I think, as the Slam Ram? It is a little different, isn't it? Yeah. Or is it? Well, it certainly looks like it. It looks like a little extendo on the chassis, but maybe not. Regardless, this thing is just an extendo howitzer. Instead of dealing with the 105mm, you're dealing with 155, so you gain the 50mm on that big O beautiful explosion. And I think it can hit a little further at 3,800 meters. A little longer time, I think, to set up. But it could be paradropped, which I've not even thought about doing that. But still, having the option is cool. This is great for hitting enemy supplies, the cluster munition. Really good for hitting like a the equivalent of like Patriots or Scud missile launchers, that type of thing. So really cool. This thing is fun. I think I'm even going to throw it in here because it's just a good time. And I've not even yet used the cluster rounds. I know they exist, but that's something I'd like to try out. Still have a whopping 500 points to spend here, so let's go ahead and throw in the misclick. And let's go ahead and just start with the misclick right there. The 3, doesn't even say what this is. 70mm round of heat. Okay. And no armor package. Actually, let's go with the Eek armor. There we go. Try to spend a little bit more cash on that. I'll grab one of those. Hell, 2 of those. Let's go back shopping for the Avenger. Now here's where you can kind of recalculate your costs a little bit. And maybe we'll grab another Brutus too. There we go. We're a little bit more on the survivability. So let's go with what might be in contact or combat a little bit more. And stock up on our decks. I think this is actually quite good. 1430 is good enough for me. So I'm good with that just for teaching purposes. I want to move on. Oops. To helicopters now. Now helicopters are very much like aircraft in my mind. There's like a couple of variants, but it really comes down to the weapons. So we've got ourselves the Super Cobra, the Viper, the Apache, and the Longbow. So 2 of these are basically Cobras and the other 2 are Apaches. Then we have ourselves the Chinook, which I mentioned before for troop transport and for bringing boys to and from the front line. So great piece of equipment there. We get 4 of those here. Super Stallion, haven't seen people using that as much. It's for the Marines here. Great opportunity, though, to bring in a lot of supplies, as well as the Sea Stallion. So both of these are somewhat similar. They've kind of got similar speeds, similar capacities. They're kind of similar. I mean, this one can hold 30,000 versus the 17,000 for the Super Stallion. But, yeah, the King Stallion and the Osprey are all very good variants. These are all for the Marines, I believe, all of these. And maybe not the King Stallion, but they all kind of work the same as a heavy, slow transport helicopter for troops, but really good for supply. And the Osprey for the Marines, I could recommend that, I guess, but I think really bringing the Marines in on the ground is something that I would recommend because there has been a lot of airplay lately, and a lot of people are just bringing in so many aircraft at the beginning that bringing these out mid-game, mid-beginning, you're either going to see a ton of enemy aircraft and get these shot down, or after that whole, cluster bomb of craziness, then you call these in, but by then the enemy ground forces have arrived and they have like anti-aircraft. So it's hard to figure out a perfect window to fit in the Osprey for troop delivery, but they're still good for supply. And so that same concept goes for the King Stallion, the Super Stallion, the Black Hawk as well for troop transport, and also again customizations here. You got to take a look at all these. A lot of these are various amounts of miniguns and HMGs continuously. Here you have a GAU 21, which you can, yeah, that's okay. That's a big O gun. That's a big O. I wish actually we had those on the Humvees, but yeah. So there's a couple of extra little tricks up their sleeves, but essentially the concepts are all the same. These are quick and medium. They feel like medium vehicles where they kind of move at a medium speed. They have medium armor. They can take a couple hits. They can take a little beating, but they're likely to be shot down on their way out. But they certainly can get in. So all of these are great transport supply helicopters. They cross over and are also armed. Like, for example, the Osprey has the GAU 17. So that's pretty sweet, too. So you may have seen that before, but definitely experiment with these. Can't recommend the Chinook enough, though, for the current Airborne build. I hear it's a wild ride from a lot of people who've been on a Chinook before, but the Osprey is a little faster, but this just seems to be... I'm not losing too many of these when I'm getting out of the battle, so these seem to survive a little bit better. Not sure why. It might be the size. I'm not exactly sure. All right. The Kiowa Warrior. This is kind of a little interesting helicopter. I wanted to cover this one first for our attack choppers because it doesn't really fit into what I've been seeing people also do with the Venom. The Venom can be armed this way as well, where you can get guided rockets on here. Think of this as just like a badass Huey. And I really don't think I have to explain that too much because we've all seen that in the movies and TV shows and stuff. But yeah, you can put door gunners on there and rockets, and it's great for bringing people in and out. But the Kiowa just seems to be a smaller version of that is much more mean. It is much more heavy hitting with Stinger missiles, and this is great for shooting down enemy choppers. This is something people did a lot of times in Wargame, where they would send out a very light, very fast AA chopper, and these were very scary because they could usually outrange or at least outfire enemy choppers. And so 4 missiles is quite a bit, but still I would want a lot more. So this is a great way to hunt down enemy choppers. Really cool thing. Haven't seen a lot of people do it. Very cool wargame tactic. probably a higher tier tactic, but just keep in mind it's also really good for bringing in Hydra rockets. You know, these Hydra rockets, you could definitely use this on like a group of open infantry, but I think that opportunity is going to be rare. These Hydras 14 might be good at firing on like a building where the enemy's occupied, but you have to micromanage this thing so much that it might not be worth it, where you have to come in, fire 14 missiles, and then bail out. So that might be something to consider. But again, remember, you can keep toying around with all these things, and even put Hellfires on there, which might be good for cracking some tanks. This essentially could be your mini longbow. You can call this your short bow. I mean, those are some big-ass missiles, dude. But let's start with the longbow then. Oh, yeah. Even bigger then. We have ourselves the longbow. So that's why I called it the mini longbow, or the short bow, because this has 8 of those missiles, those Hellfires, and Hydras as well. This thing is outstanding for basically stopping tank convoys. If the enemy's calling in a bunch of tanks or a ton of armored vehicles, if you've got recon on them and you've got yourself a longbow, you're gonna have a good time. These are really good with that. Not to mention, you can continue the pain by adding even more frickin' Hellfires. So there you have up to 16, dude, 16 Hellfires for 330 points. That's an insane price, an insanely valuable target for the enemy to shoot down. But this thing could single-handedly stop a tank push if they see it and if they see what it's armed with. Again, intimidation, folks. And if somebody doesn't know, they're about to find out real quick. You know what I mean? So this thing can really, even though it has a chance to miss and could get damaged and needs to pull back, you could quickly do repairs without even having to rearm and do that quickly. So cool stuff. The Apache is kind of the same concept. We can also put Hellfires on this too. But it's just not as, like, I think there's a difference in the, there's something in the optics, I think. Oh yeah, the vision, right there. It has 2400 versus 2000. You can see the little radar dish at the top there. Pop on for the longbow. Yeah, so it can actually see a little bit further, which is really cool. And there might be some other differences that I don't notice right off the bat. But yeah, essentially they're the same points. They're a 40-point difference for the extra radar, but you do want that as added recon. I mean, this thing can also hunt, search and destroy on its own and go out hunting, but this I've just always used as a roadblock, a great aerial roadblock. So cool stuff. The Super Cobras and the Vipers are essentially the same concept, but just different. The Apaches and the Longbows kind of feel like a tank in the skies, as were the Vipers, and the Super Cobras feel like a Rolls Royce of the sky. No, I don't know. I don't know. The Cobra's the Cobra. That's really all I could say about it, man. The Apaches certainly feel like a tank in the sky, but the Vipers don't feel like an IFV and they don't feel like a tank. But they're certainly really fast and really able to turn quickly and do a lot of damage. These helicopters are outstanding. They're really good at taking out a variety of enemy weapons, as they also have their, what are these called? The outer, wingtips, right. The wingtips are mounted with sidewinders, so we have our anti-aircraft capability here. But then also we could maybe not do that and just go for our kind of mini, actually, do we? Oh, yeah, we do have high Hellfires here. So again, you could go for your baby longbow. Well, hell, even the Apache is cheaper than that by 5 points. I wonder why. That would be why. Because this thing has a 107 20mm. This should have a 30 though. Yeah, 30mm. I was gonna say maybe the gun is different there. I don't know why that would be 5 more points. This thing's just more fast, maybe. Dispersion 4.3. 2000. Not really sure the differences here, but definitely I would like to try out all of these just to see them in battle. But what I'm going to go ahead and recommend for everybody is adding, I'm going to build this deck now. Definitely want to add that longbow, the pimped out longbow. Definitely want to add myself an Apache, but I'm going to go with the guided rockets here. And we're going to go with these ones. Because I want a missile chopper here to destroy buildings that get in my way. I'm going to go with 2 of those. If I can. Oh, I added 4. Doop. Okay, we want 1 of those, 1 of these, actually 2 of these, Apaches, 1 longbow. I also want the Super Cobra, but I'm going to pimp that out with the Viper to have the sidearms, which are great. These are the, I think I called them sidewinders, but these are basically your air-to-air missiles. And a couple of Hellfires that I'm going to replace with Hydra 38 of these, the smaller rockets. I want continuous suppression on buildings from these choppers. The larger missiles I feel like are better for vehicle panicking and for destruction, but we're going to go with 2 of those again. And then I also want to bring in a... I actually want to try this little Kiowa. I would recommend this for the high tier. You know, if you want a little, hey, I did my homework bonus, that's definitely for you right there. I'm also going to bring in the, maybe a Chinook army here. A couple of those then for the airborne and for supply, and we'll kind of keep it at that for now. And if I want more of something, I can reduce the weapon systems on these later. Oops. All right, the last thing we want to cover then today is air. And this is the nuke you've all been waiting for. This is how to get the nuke. I'm going to put it in there. For those of you wanting the nuke, you need to select the B1B Lancer. That's under your airborne tab for the factions that get that. And there's your B6112 tactical nuke. 900 points. You get one. It's a cruise missile. The enemy can shoot it down. It's glorious. It's great. Wonderful when it lands. Definitely recommend it for that co-op mission where the enemy's a big old pain in the ass at the end where they're all clumped up. But you can also get your early Hail Mary plays when people don't have their Patriot equivalents set up on enemy lines. But anyway, so there you go. B1B Lancer, nuclear weapon there. All right, let's go over the aircraft. Now, again, this is really a crash course in this, and I know I'm not doing all these vehicles justice, and we are rushing through, but this is supposed to be a beginner's guide, and I think aircraft honestly deserve their own video, helicopters included, but certainly a lot of these weapon systems by default are pretty good, honestly. Really, really, really. The Globemaster here is your transports for your airborne troops, so we'll start with those. Wow, so big I can't even zoom out to see the damn thing. But this is going to transport 102 men. So go ahead and grab maybe one of those for transporting your airborne troops in and or vehicles. They're more than likely going to get shot down, but there also is the capability of calling in the C-130, and this is good too, a more cheaper option by 50 points for additional forces to drop. Maybe additional supply. You can drop supply that way as well. Harriers are good, although I'm not seeing as many people use these now. These are a great multi-role fighter. We're here with the Harrier 2 Plus. We have ourselves a bunch of air-to-air missiles and designation pods and JDAMs. So we got bombs for the ground, anti-tank missiles for the tanks, air-to-air. Pretty good, but not the meta at the moment. Same with the Nighthawk, or Night Attack. Keep that in mind. We're also going to jump over to the Prowler. Now this is where you take your notes. Get out the notebook, folks. There is something called SEED, and what this is basically it is a radar homing anti-radar missile. Here's what this is. When the enemy has a anti-aircraft battery up that fires missiles or uses radar, these little missiles here and the aircraft itself all work together to basically find that signal, that ping. Think of like submarines. These are like torpedoes that find enemy submarines, basically. Now, not to confuse you, those submarines, think of your anti-aircraft missile launchers and think of these things as missiles. That's what they are. Perfect. Now we're back in reality. So anyway, these things are great. These harms here fire off and can take down enemy missiles from a long way away. Missile launchers. And you can even get 4 of these bad boys, or you can get the fuel tanks to loiter for a while and really come in slow and sneak up on the enemy. So these things can like just fire they're not cruise missiles, but it does work like a cruise missile where it gets close, fires off, and homes in only on the thing that can have a radar signal. So it's not going to destroy anybody who has like a Stinger or Stinger equivalent, like an Igla. It's going to destroy things like the Buk or the S3, what is it, S300s or whatever. Anything that's a large vehicle that has big O tubes that point up in the air or missiles pointed up in the air, this is going to hunt these down. And so it might be a good idea to bring a pair of these in order to get through enemy AA nets and then make it through. So this is a great piece of equipment. This is wonderful. Almost a must-have. I mean, you can score a lot of points with this and try to save your allies who are trying to bring in transports and helicopters and stuff too. So everybody should have one of these if you can. Definitely recommended. The Hornets here are great. We've used these a bunch previously, as well as the D, which is great too. We've got a lot of guided missiles, a lot of air-to-air missiles, but really these are good for pounding the ground. A ground pound, these are where it's at. So check through all these things for checking out the, especially the bombs that they have access to, a lot of bombs, and then also ATGMs, which are very good too. Although, again, I haven't seen too many people using that at this time. I think there's just a bigger focus on air-to-air combat, so that's why we're not seeing the Harriers, that's why we're not seeing the Hornets. But they're not, this meta could change at any time, so people eventually, I think, are going to figure out that these are very fast, nimble, very good snipers that come in real quick, drop down like a hawk, although it's a Hornet, onto the enemy, and then get out of there before too much time passes. So these are really good for high speed, low drag, get in, get out, rip and dips. So just keep that in mind. But they're also capable of air-to-air combat. So again, another great multi-role fighter. But on to the Eagle series. This is what everybody's using now. I'm seeing a ton of people use the Eagles and Strike Eagles because of the sheer number of Sidewinders and AMRAAMs that they come in with. The Russians are bringing in a lot of their Su-57s and other advanced fighters that are really dominating the skies. Right now in the game, the Russians have a big supreme advantage most times because of the durability of their aircraft, and it just seems like they can turn on a dime. But these boys can engage from a distance, so if you're using Patriots to try to shoot at them, and you also spawn in a couple of F-15Cs or Strike Eagles, or even better, the Strike Eagle 2, these are probably going to take them down with no problem. Now, these things like have 16 AMRAAMs, so if the enemy doesn't have too many aircraft remaining or out at the time, this is a great way to area denial. Yeah, 16 missiles is an insane amount, and this is more likely to get shot down. And that is a crazy amount of points. But keep in mind, you could also change some of those. So you could go with a great number of those AMRAAMs, but then mix it up with some... where are they at here? The... Ooh, Stormbreakers. No. Yeah, the AIM-9s. Or actually, the Sidewinders, too. So then you can have 6 of those? 8 of those. Wow, I didn't even know that. So 8 Sidewinders and 8... Sidewinders and AMRAAM combos. There's even more of those actually mixed together. This thing is like that flying truck from before, the Slam Ram. So the Eagle 2 with the AMRAAMs and Slam Rams, you're going to be ramming, slamming, ripping, dipping, all that crap. All right, so yeah. So definitely bring one of these in. It doesn't have to be the 500-pointer. This is definitely something that is more advanced, 100%. Bring in maybe a Strike Eagle, kind of more of a baby mini option, like, just like the first version to get started with, to learn how that works, and not too much of a risk. At least you're saving yourself almost 200 points of headache. F-35B, this thing is kind of a lot of people use this as a stealth bomber, and that's kind of how it's intended to be used for bombing in the game. Like, people are just kind of zipping in with these and trying to drop a bomb and get out. They're using these like the F-117s in War Game, although it doesn't really play that way. But I have seen people try to drop off some bombs on targets this way, and especially like big targets too, like buildings that have multiple troops around it, or like an enemy SAM area. Yeah, I know. They're trying to punch through SAM nets and drop bombs on those, so that's really cool. I've also seen some people use this, the Harvest Hawk, which, yeah, it's cool. It's great. We have ourselves the Griffin missiles and Hellfire missiles too. And I've seen people calling this out, but I don't get it. Like, I don't know why anybody calls this out. I never see it kill any. I don't think I've seen this thing kill a single thing ever. It does have spots for troops, so it is certainly capable of firing at a bunch of ground targets and dropping troops. But I don't know. I feel like this is something meant for the campaign that they put in for multiplayer. That's all cool. I've got a lot more points to spend in the air, and I'll probably buff that out with a couple of more fighters here. So we'll probably throw in a couple more F-15Cs and a couple of Strike Eagles based on everything going on currently in the game. Whoa, okay. So there you go. That's when you can't do something. Here's the situation. Category limit has been exhausted. So looks like we can go over a little bit there, and it seems like we can get away with it. So that's that whole 10% thing that you all were telling me about. That is our deck, ladies and gentlemen, for today. And a good briefing on pretty much everything that's new for the Airborne forces. I will go into kind of more specifics about them specifically. You can do that, of course, by just clicking here, like I showed you at the beginning. These are all the things that they have, but the game doesn't play that way. You can't just bring in American Airborne and that's it. You have to mix them up with Marines or tanks too, and so it's like you're working with two branches of the military together, which is kind of cool. It makes it feel more grand that way, that they have to rely on each other as you will with your other players in the game. So very cool that you have to rely on the two specializations within your nation, and then also the teammates around you too. So a very cool thing that makes Broken Arrow special. All right, that's all my time here for today, so please do leave a like and check out the beta today, everybody. I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know your questions down below, and I'll answer what I can. Take care. We'll see you next time.